Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we are continuing our study of the book of Yehoshua with chapter 10b. And we'll complete this chapter today. We have just read of the miraculous victory of the people over the five kings who had come to kill the Givonites, the five Amorite kings, and the stopping of the sun at Givon, and of that miracle. And interestingly, I do want to. We mentioned this last time, but the miracle was initiated by a request from Joshua. Until that point, there was no overt miracles that God had performed, and whether or not that the stopping of the sun was an actual, extremely incredible overt miracle, or whether it was not, depending on which school of thought you subscribe to, the rationalists versus the non-rationalists. Regardless, assuming the simple meaning of the verse that it was an incredible miracle, it was a miracle asked for by Joshua. It was a miracle that Joshua, as a human being, asked God to perform, which continues that theme that as the battles progress, we find less and less overt intervention by God. In other words, the crossing of the Jordan was incredible, but then Yericho, there was much more miraculous intervention. There was a lot less, and so on. And we find less and less intervention by God until the last battle that we read about, where the intervention had to be requested by a human being. We'll find in the next battles upcoming that we read about today, even less overt intervention by God. But let's keep reading. So Vayoshav, this battle was complete. The sun finally did set, and the five kings' armies were decimated. Vayoshav Yoshua v'chol Yisraelim olamachne al Gilgal, and Joshua and the entire people of Israel with him returned back to their camp at Gilgal. Vayinusu chameshes hamalachim ha'ela, and the five kings who had led the battle against them, they escaped and they ran. Vayechavu b'ma'ara b'Makeda, and they hid in a cave in Makeda. Vayugad liYoshua, and it was reported to Joshua Lemor, saying as follows: Nimtzu chameshes hamalachim nechbim b'ma'ara b'Makeda. We have found the five kings. We know where they're hiding. We know they're hiding in this cave in Makeda. Vayomer Yoshua, and Joshua said, Go lo avonim gedolos al pi ha'ma'ara. Stop up the cave, put a large stones over the cave so that they're locked up in there. V'yafkidu la'anashim l'shamram, and post people to guard so that these kings cannot, push the stones away and get out. V'yatem al ta'amodu. So while we have their leaders locked, there's still remnants of the soldiers. Ridfuach, don't stop the battle. Ridfuach ve'avechem zinavtem osam. I want you to chase after the remnants of their armies, and zinavtem literally means be like a tail to them. In other words, harass them from behind as they try to escape in the various directions that they're running. Al titnum lavo el orehem. Do not allow them to return to their cities. Obviously, Yehoshua is afraid that if they do return to the cities, there's always a chance that the panic will be over. They can regroup and remain a threat. Because God has placed them in your hands. Continue to attack them until they're destroyed. Vayhik as a force. Vayhik chalos Yehoshua, and now their leadership are locked up, so we know that their leaders cannot rally them and try to rebuild their armies. So it was when Joshua of Israel stopped lahakosa makagdol myorad tumam until they were completely destroyed, and so the leaders are locked up and being guarded, and the Israelites completed striking down the enemies. Vasaridim sardu mehem, and there was maybe a few leftovers, a few escapees, a few refugees, a few fugitives, vayavo or Mitzar, who had managed to escape into the fortified towns. There were a few left, but no actual force, no armed force that can pose a threat. So now the nation comes back to the camp to Joshua, Makeda, who is now at Makeda, which is the place where the cave is. Bishalom, they returned in peace. Lo choratz livnei Yisrael ish es lishono. There was not even a person who would make a snide remark to a member of the Israelites. So the people of Canaan had achieved respect. Now the people of Canaan were afraid of them, and people wouldn't even make a funny face at the Israelites because they were so afraid of them. Yomer Yehoshua pitchu et pi hamara. So Joshua said, now we can open the cave. Now that their armies are destroyed, we can open the cave. I want you to take out these 5 kings. Now, do take note of the fact that in these days, traditionally, when a conquering army conquers an army, and then they had the king, you could only use your imagination to imagine what kind of terrible tortures and stuff they would do to celebrate their victory over that king. But in this case, we don't find that type of behavior, and Yoshua, as we'll find out in a minute, will execute them, but still have some level of respect. Vayasu Cain, and he did this. He took the 5 kings out of the cave. Et Melech Yerushalayim, the king of Jerusalem. The kings of all these towns, the 5 towns. And it was when these kings were brought out in front of Joshua, and Joshua called out to all of the people of Israel, and he said to them, specifically addressing the generals, the officers of the armies, that had been with him. Kirvu, come close, simu et raglechem, place your leg al tzavarei hamalachim ha'ela over their neck. Vayikruvu vayasimes ragleim al tzavarei. And they came, so the kings were lined up, and the generals came and put their feet over the necks of the kings. Vayomer aleim Yoshua, al tiru v'al techatu. I do not want you. Joshua did this. He wanted to inspire courage and say, do not be afraid. Don't be fearful of them. Chizku v'im, to be strong and be courageous, because this symbolizes kichacha. This symbolizes what God what God is going to do to all of your enemies, that you are waging war against them. And then Joshua struck them down, and hung them on 5 trees. And they were hanging on the trees until evening, but not for a long period of time, as we saw earlier with the king of Ai. They respectfully took down the bodies at the sunset. When the sun set, Joshua commanded that they take them off the trees, and they put the bodies in the cave in which they had been hiding. And they put stones over the cave until this day. So they left them in the cave as their burial place. And then the town of Makeda, Joshua captured on that day, and he struck them down by a sword, and its king, he destroyed them, and all of the people that lived there, he did not leave any refugees. And he did to the king of Makeda the same thing he did to the king of Jericho. Now we're just going to list place names and battles. It's going to be a little bit tedious, but we're going to go through the text. He went from Makeda to Livna. He waged war against Livna. And God placed them also in the hands of the Israelites, Malka and her king, and destroyed them by sword. And the people there also, no one was left. And he also executed their king, like he had done the previous ones. And then Joshua went from Livna to the town of Lachish. This is a famous town. This became a very important city in Judea throughout history. But here now Joshua is capturing the city of Lachish from Canaanites. He camped against it. Waged war against it. And God put Lachish under the hands of the Israelites. And on the second day, the first day they laid the siege, the second day he struck them down. Just like he did to the other towns. And then Horam, the king of Gezer, came Lazor at Lachish to help out the town of Lachish, which we just read Joshua had attacked. But Joshua had already attacked Lachish. Presumably, the king of Gezer didn't realize. He thought he'd be helping them out, but he came a little too late to the party. But when he came, Joshua struck his army and left no remnants of his army either. Then they went from that place to Eglon, waged war against it. He destroyed them just like he did to the town of Lachish. Some places I'm not necessarily translating these terms because they're just a repeat of what had happened to the previous towns and names of the towns. Remember, in these towns, we read of no overt miracles. There's nothing super fancy happening here. I'm sorry. From Eglon they went to Hebron, and I'm going to read this. And they destroyed it by sword. Again, and it's her king and all the surrounding hamlets of Hebron. They destroyed it, and so on. And then they went to another city. They waged war against Devir. The same thing. They destroyed Devir. They destroyed its king. Until that city was conquered as well. And then there's other towns that were, and we just here describe the region, the mountainous areas of Judea, which now would be called the Judean Mountains, Negev, which is the southern portion, south of that, which is the Negev Desert, Shefela, and the slopes leading down towards the Mediterranean, Ashedos, and all of their kings. The Shefela is the low-lying lands. Ashedos are the slopes that lead down towards the Mediterranean. I translated it a little wrong before, I'm sorry. And all of the kings, the smaller kings of all these towns, Lo Ashir Sarid, no remnant, Be'et Kol HaNeshama Achrim, Kasher Tziva Adonai Yisrael, and they killed all the people that had been occupying these areas beforehand. Vayakem Yoshua mikodesh Barnea v'ad Aza. Yoshua struck them down from the land of Kadesh Barnea all the way to Gaza, so he's reaching closer to the coast of the Mediterranean and farther south. Beit Kol Eretz Goshen, and the region of Goshen, v'ad Givon, all the way up to the land of Givon, where the big miracle that we read about earlier happened. Beit Kol HaMelachim Ha'ele v'et Artzam, all of these kings and their lands, Lachad Yoshua Pamechas. This was a massive campaign, and within this one big campaign, Joshua took over this entire area. Why was he able to do this? Ki Adonai Elohei Yisrael nilcham liYisrael. Now this is an important point, because God, the Lord of Israel, was waging war for Israel. Here the text is deliberately reminding us that despite the fact that there have been no miracles here we see an invading army, which is obviously has gained confidence and power and tactics, has won all these battles without miraculous intervention. But here Joshua is reminding us that even when we don't see the miraculous intervention, so God is still waging war for the Israelites. And this is why Joshua did that when he executed the 5 kings, he wanted to remind the people that we've been seeing God recede behind his cloak, behind his curtain, into the background. But that doesn't mean he's not here. He's still here. Even though the human beings are doing these actions that we don't see the overt miracles, God is still there. And this is the lesson that we need to take in our own lives, that our efforts and the things that we do are incredible and we can accomplish incredible things. And we don't see miracles. None of us see miracles every day. God doesn't perform these miracles for us anymore. But that doesn't mean he's not there, and that doesn't mean he's not supporting it. And this is the lesson to take from this chapter. Vayashav Yoshua v'chol Yisrael imo, and Joshua and all the people of Israel with him returned al Hamachne to the camp HaGilgala in Gilgal. Thank you for studying chapter 10 with me. Looking forward to studying chapter 11 and the rest of this book of Joshua together.